The DJI Osmo Pocket 4 is an incredible camera, but I see so many people making the same mistakes over and over that are absolutely killing their footage and their experience with the camera. Now, I've been shooting with this camera since it launched, and in this video I'm going to show you 7 mistakes that you can stop making right now to really improve your footage, and some of these are going to surprise you, so let's get right into it. Mistake number 1 is using D-Log for everything. I know everybody says shoot in the flat profile because you get more dynamic range. And yes, the Pocket 4 has incredible 10-bit D-Log with 14 stops of dynamic range. But here's the thing, if you're not properly color grading your footage, D-Log is going to make your videos look worse, not better. D-Log footage is flat, desaturated, and washed out on purpose because it is designed to be color graded in post. So if you just upload it as is to YouTube or Instagram, it's going to look terrible. And here's another thing that people aren't talking about. When you use D-Log with the 2x or 4x digital zoom, the noise in the shadows gets really bad, and the zoom is one of the best features on this camera, and the D-Log actually makes it look worse. So the fix, if you don't want to spend the time color grading, shoot on normal mode. The normal profile looks great on this camera. I would only use D-Log when you're outdoors with really good light, and if you know how to color grade and you're going to be editing in Premiere, Resolve, or Final Cut Pro X. Mistake number 2 is leaving the gimbal on the wrong mode. The Pocket 4 has 3 gimbal modes, and most people never change that from the default mode. Follow mode is the default mode, and it is great for general shooting. The camera follows your pan and your tilt movements. But if you're walking and vlogging, the camera can bob up and down with your steps, which you probably don't want. So switch to tilt lock mode when you're walking. This locks the vertical axis, so you get a perfectly smooth level horizon, even if your hand is bouncing. And this single change will make your walking footage look 10 times more professional. FPV mode is for when you want the camera to follow all 3 axes of movement. This is great for action shots, but terrible for everyday use because the footage will roll and tilt all over the place. So don't leave this mode on by accident, only use this mode for intentional, super dynamic kind of shots. Mistake number 3 is letting the camera choose your shutter speed. Now by default, the Pocket 4 will use auto shutter speed, and in bright conditions, this might crank your shutter up to 1/2000 or even higher. This can make your footage look really jittery, almost like a security camera, and definitely not cinematic. The fix is the 180-degree shutter rule, and that just means setting your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames a second, set it to 1/60. And if you're shooting in PAL at 25 frames a second, well then set it to 1/50. Now doing this is going to change the exposure on your camera, so you can always just use a magnetic ND filter to help lower the brightness down. Mistake number 4 is not taking advantage of ActiveTrack 7. This is one of the best features on the Pocket 4, and so many people are either not using it or just using it wrong. ActiveTrack 7 is amazing, and it can lock onto people, animals, cars, and other subjects like just a stationary object. And in the Pocket 4, it even works when you're in 2x zoom, which the Pocket 3 can't do. And in the Pocket 4, it can actually even track in the 4x zoom mode. But here's the mistake. People try to use ActiveTrack in really low light and then wonder why it loses the subject. The tracking relies on contrast and detail in the image to follow the subject. So in low light, you have much less contrast, and the tracking is just going to struggle. Also, something that's really cool, you can now register faces in the camera. So if you go to the tracking settings, tap the icon in the middle left of the screen, and then add your face. Then, turn on registered subject priority, and now the camera will automatically follow you even if you're in a crowd. So if you're a solo vlogger, this is a game changer because it's going to track your face, which is who you want to film. So just set it up once, use that specific mode, and you're good to go. Mistake number 5 is not matching your frame rate to the content you're shooting. I see some people shooting everything at 4K 60, and they wonder why their footage doesn't have that cinematic look to it. So here's the deal, 24 frames is going to give you that cinematic, film-like look. That's what movies get shot at. And then 60 frames is going to give you super smooth motion, which is great for action shots or B-roll shots that you plan to slow down. 30 frames is going to be sort of somewhere in the middle. It's going to look more cinematic, but you can't slow it down as much as 60. So really going between 24 and 60 frames a second kind of makes the most sense. And then of course this camera also has a dedicated slow motion mode, which lets you shoot up to 4K 240 frames a second, which is insane. If you shoot your talking head vlog sections at 60 frames a second, it's going to look more like a soap opera or a news broadcast. And that might be fine for some content, but if you want that cinematic feel, drop it down to 24 frames a second. Mistake number 6 is leaving exposure on full auto when you're walking around outdoors. Because here's what happens. You're walking down the street vlogging, you pass under a tree or you walk by a dark building, and then the auto exposure adjusts, which is what auto exposure does. And then you walk back out into the sunlight and your exposure adjusts again, and your footage ends up with all these distracting brightness shifts. The fix is simple. First, set your shutter speed manually using the 180-degree rule like I mentioned earlier, and then set your ISO to auto but with a capped range, and I use 50 to 400 outdoors. So this way the camera still adapts to changing light conditions, but the adjustments are subtle and smooth instead of super dramatic. Alternatively, you can tap and hold on the screen to lock exposure completely, and this is great for when you're doing a shot like going from outdoors to indoors and you want it to be at the proper exposure when you're outdoors. So it's really good for static shots, but for walking around talking to the camera, you want to go with that capped ISO approach instead. And then mistake number 7 is leaving the microphone settings on default and wondering why your audio sounds weird. The Pocket 4 has 3 built-in microphones and they sound really good, but you just want to set them up properly for what you're shooting. The default microphone mode might not be optimized for vlogging. Switch it to stereo front and back if you're talking to the camera. This makes sure the mics are focused on picking up sounds from your direction as well as some environmental sounds. If you're shooting outdoors, turn on the wind noise reduction. The difference is huge because without it, even a light breeze can really affect your audio. And if you have the DJI Mic 3 from the Creator combo, definitely use it because it records 32-bit float audio, which basically means your audio is unclippable. You can scream into it and fix it in post. It's incredible. When you connect your DJI Mic 3, the Pocket 4 is going to automatically switch to that from the external mics. It's super easy to connect your Mic 3 to the Pocket 4, and when you use that, you'll notice a massive improvement when you're comparing to the internal mics. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of all 7 mistakes. Number 1, do not use D-Log unless you're going to color grade your footage. Number 2, switch to tilt lock mode when you're walking around. Number 3, follow the 180-degree shutter rule and get ND filters for outside. Number 4, set up and use ActiveTrack and register your face. Number 5, match your frame rate to your content. Number 6, cap your auto ISO range when you're shooting outdoors. And then number 7, set your mic to stereo front and back and turn on wind noise reduction. Fix these 7 things and your Pocket 4 footage is going to look and sound dramatically better. So thanks for watching this one, and I will see you in the next video.